Hello again, and welcome to Shaah with the European Union. I am your co-host Hassan Santur. Today I had the opportunity to speak with Kevin Mackey. He is the Chief of Party of Somalia Resilience Programme. This is a consortium that brings together 7 international NGOs, and they work in the areas of building resilience in Somalia so that crises such as drought and floods and locust infestations don't end up destroying the most vulnerable communities in Somalia. And we also talked about how the current pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has impacted the work that they're doing in Somalia, among many other issues and topics. Here's our conversation. I've reached Kevin Mackey in Nairobi, Kenya. Kevin, can you take a moment to introduce yourself and what you do?
Okay. I'm Kevin Mackey. I'm the Chief of Party for the SomReP Consortium. The SomReP Consortium is a coming together of 7 INGOs. I've been in Somalia continuously since 2008. I've held a number of different roles. Over that time, I've been an emergency response manager for World Vision. I've been the operations director for World Vision. I've been the program development director for World Vision. I also was seconded to the UN, both FAO and WFP, in the food security cluster for about 9 months as a senior advisor during the drought crisis of 2017, 2018. Following that, I joined as the Chief of Party for the SomReP, which is housed under World Vision. I also helped found SomReP in 2012.
Great. And what exactly is SomReP?
So, as I mentioned, following the famine of 2011, a group of like-minded NGOs came together to try to pull together best practice, to try to find ways to put that best practice together. We all knew there were things that we were doing that were working. There were a lot of things that we were doing that were not working in terms of addressing the underlying causes of vulnerability in Somalia. At that time, there was no real funding for resilience. Resilience was sort of a new idea. So I would say the first year of our existence was basically advocacy. We started to share what was working within our different programs across the 7 agencies. We started to develop a theory of change, and we began to share that theory of change with different donors to try to nudge them in the first instance to move beyond short-term funding. To take you back, when I started in 2008, most of our funding was 6 to 12 months. We had maybe 1 grant, maybe 2 grants that went over 12 months. And it was very difficult to string together over multiple years interventions that could really start to address the underlying causes of vulnerability. And it was a structural weakness with the way humanitarian assistance was financed. At the same time, we hadn't created a compelling multi-sector, multi-year program that we could sell. So that was kind of the point of the SomReP, was to generate that understanding, pilot those approaches, and then refine them over time. And so the SomReP that is in place today is actually phase 2. Phase 1 ended sometime around 2018, the end of 2018. And now we're in phase 2, which has seen the design evolve as the opportunities and challenges in the Somalia context have changed.
Okay.
In some locations.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the idea of theory of change. So if you could just explain to me if you have a particular sort of philosophy or theory of change that is that you go into Somalia with that is unique to Somalia. What is that exactly?
Well, you're lucky I have my strategy here. Just looking. We have a nice diagram here let's just say, before we even get into this discussion of theory of change, we have sort of a meta theory.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just try to show it to you here on the screen. It's called the push and pulls.
Okay.
The push and pulls. And so many of the interventions that SomReP did in its first 5 or 6 years of implementation were what we have kind of classified as push activities. Push activities are equipping individuals, groups, community institutions with skills, assets, and basically new capacities to absorb shocks and increasingly over time adapt to both opportunities and challenges. And then finally, in our phase 2, we start working on what we're calling pull interventions. Pull interventions are working at different levels of the socioeconomic system. It requires continuous work with the bottom, but it's trying to link the bottom to the top. So working more deeply with the evolving state structures, particularly at subnational levels.
Mm-hmm.
Working with market structures and systems. And the point of pull activities is to create enabling conditions for the groups, the individuals that you've been supporting through push strategies to be able to enter into commercial markets, mm-hmm. to generate sustainability of the intervention. So for a farmer, let's take the example of you might have, for the first 2-3 years of the program, supported him with inputs, supported him with new skills in terms of good agricultural practice. You've supported him and his neighbors to develop new risk-sharing mechanisms and group marketing through the development of farmers groups. So that farmer has new capacity. And that new capacity can support him or her to have greater food security when coupled with concurrent investments in the resource base. So that could be water source rehabilitation, construction, or upgrade. That could be the same you might do to a pastoral landscape. And that reaches a certain level of capacity. However, if there are not enabling institutions, enabling systems, and enabling structures, then you will push those people forever. Mm-hmm. They need interventions which pull or demand, for example, in the commercial aspect, demand their products. Farmers need markets. And if they can produce more foods, but if there is no market for their foods, mm-hmm. then there's no incentive for that farmer to continue to make investments and strengthen his farming base. If there's no access to credit for that farmer mm-hmm. to invest in his business, then he won't be as proactive to grow that business, because there's no reason to produce more food if nobody's buying. If you look at community structure, let's just take an early warning committee. Early warning committees, in the first instance, let's say the first 5 or 6 years of the design, are really there to strengthen their ability to identify, proactively plan, respond, and then provide information to us to respond. Increasingly, we're working at the subnational level with ministries of humanitarian affairs to help them build up their systems, their institutions, so that they can generate demand for early warning information from communities to help them articulate the bigger need of their district or region with regard to a particular humanitarian shock. So, yeah, that's what I mean by push and pull. So these are sort of the meta themes around which we have a theory of change, and then basically out of that we have 5 result areas within our design, each one of which has a theory of change. And then there's a resulting theory of change that kind of covers all of those. But to summarize the theory of change, it's easier to think about it in terms of these concepts of push and pull and the different interventions that are sequenced over time. And they don't move at the same pace in different locations. What you can do in the Afgoi corridor is not the same that you can do in Garowe, for example.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunities, the constraints, particularly around security, are much different. A great example of this is our ability to bring together savings groups into business councils
Mm-hmm.
and groups into associations. You simply can't do that in Afgoi. As soon as the Al-Shabaab recognizes that there is an entity that can be taxed, they will tax it.
Mm-hmm.
And so farmers don't want to come together too much. Savers don't want to form business councils because as soon as the Al-Shabaab hears about that, they come knocking on their door at 5 a.m. and demand money.
Mm-hmm.
So, different places provide different opportunities. And so the program is flexible in that sense that it tries to adapt to the realities and recognizing things are getting better in some places are staying more or less the same.
Mm-hmm.
At times, places are getting worse. So the opportunities to be able to move communities along a continuum or trajectory of resilience differ.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about the savings groups that you spoke about and how that works and what are the benefits of that. But first, I wanted to talk about the idea of resilience because this is a commonly used word these days in a variety of contexts. But in the context of what you do in Somalia, what exactly is resilience?
In the first instance, and once again, I'll take you back to those 3 words. I think they're the most helpful to understanding what resilience is: absorbative, adaptive, and transformative. Absorbative is the ability of the individual to take a shock and bounce back, or of a community
and when
to
we
receive
say shock, sorry, when you say shock, were you talking about things like drought, famine, like what exactly are you talking?
Well, the 3 shocks in Somalia, the 3 principal shocks in Somalia, there are many others, but the 3 principal ones that you can kind of start to build interventions around are the drought, the flood, and conflict. Now, you'll get ad hoc shocks like locust. You'll get ad hoc shocks like COVID-19.
Yeah.
You'll get ad hoc shocks like market failures that occur sometimes very localized and are often associated with conflicts, like blockades of towns.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different shocks that can happen, but at a resilience consortium level, in terms of trying to limit the scope of what we try to intervene in, we focus on those 3, right? We focus on drought, we focus on floods, and we focus on to some degree conflict. Ours is more reactive to conflict. We do have some peace building, but our peace building is largely concentrated in our natural resource management intervention. And that's basically resource sharing of communal assets. So to create sharing arrangements, to intervene when those sharing arrangements fail regarding a rangeland or a water source. A lot of our interventions, because they take place in, let's just say, fragile environments, like Boy or Kansadere or Barakaba, they also have a stabilizing function. When you're starting to work with community groups, getting them into that behavior of planning together, and that behavior of responding together, then you're starting to stitch together the social contract, well, not the contract, but the fabric of those communities again. And that stabilizes them. It also shows them there are benefits to being in the government system, so to speak, as opposed to the Al-Shabaab system. So absorbative, so that's the first sort of thing. So there's a lot of interventions that we do at a household and at a community level that build that absorbative capacity. And some interventions evolve over time. Let me take you through savings groups.
Mhm.
Savings groups are simply in their first 3 to 12 months of existence are better organized community self-help mechanisms. They're the ways that small groups of people who are very similar to each other, they could be IDPs in the same camp, they could be people within the same livelihood group, there's certainly people within the same economic group, they can put resources to better buffer against very individualized shocks. So a very household level shock is your family member dies, you have funeral cost. Someone in your family falls sick, you need medicine. These self-help mechanisms allow people to support each other through small loans or grants within their own networks.
Mhm.
So there's strengthening of the social safety net. And that social safety net is the first buffer to support communities in the event of a shock. As those groups evolve, they build new capacity. So they start loaning each other finance as soon as they start building up savings. That happens about after 9 months. They each provide a share to their savings. We don't give them any money at the beginning because that sort of defeats the purpose of them learning how to develop saving culture and them learning how to support one another. We simply provide them tools and systems and structures to do that in. And after 9 months or so, they start loaning each other resources. They start using those resources to develop their business. So they make their livelihood more absorbative. They strengthen their livelihood at the household level.
Yeah.
Or they diversify their livelihood at household level. Maybe they get into a new line of work. Maybe they open a shop. Maybe they buy a few goats and diversify only out of agriculture. There's a lot of different ways that that pathway goes, but that's more at a household level, they become a stronger, more absorbative entity. Let's move into 12 to 24 months. This institution is in place, it's loaning itself resources, it's starting to get repayments from its members. They're starting to not only have the savings behavior, they're starting to have that very important risk-taking behavior. And so a behavior shift starts to take place, and then we can start to do new things with them. At that point, they start moving over into adaptive. That's when they start taking advantage of the opportunities and challenges of their environment. Maybe they risk-proof their agricultural production through purchase of a better asset. Or maybe they, for example, an irrigation farmer might choose to make an investment in a sluice gate and a cased irrigation canal to support his irrigation farming, right? He's strengthened his existing livelihood. Another person might have made some initial advances into a new livelihood through the in-group savings mechanism. And maybe, they're going to start off with a very small loan. They're going to start off with a loan of 20 to $100, right? That's not a lot of capital you can invest.
No.
But once they make a repayment, the group has more money. And the group continues to aggregate more money over time and are able to get larger amounts of loan. That group now is better capacitated to service its 20 members. Sometime around 24 months, usually around 18, we try to introduce what's called a business, we form groups of savings groups into what are called business councils. So you'll take 5, 10, depending on how many savings groups you've established in a location. You establish a business council, and then you provide basically a top-up grant. You say, hey, look, you guys have been doing very good loaning to yourselves. Your repayment rates are pretty good. We recognize for you to make that next step of investment, you need more capital. So we're going to inject capital into these structures through the business council. At 24 to 36 months, Now we start reaching, so that's all adaptive, right? And you start reaching transformative. Now you already have transformative taking place because transformative is behavior. Transformative is actually behavior and structures and systems. So as they have changed their behavior, they've learned how to save, they've learned how to take loans out to grow their business or diversify their business. They've learned to manage as groups larger amounts of capital and to loan those larger amounts of capital. That requires governance. That requires groups of unrelated savings groups coming together. So we're talking about people with different livelihoods. We're talking about people from different clans having to learn to work together to administer the business council funds. So this is a whole set of different behaviors that start to creep in. What we sort of, in our mind, count as transformation is when we start to move business councils into formal linkages with banks, or we support them to work at district levels where no banks or unaffordable credit is available through the development of microfinance institutions. That's where transformation starts happening, because now you're starting to link them to the formal or semi-formal, but you're also changing the system. We capitalize that much more heavily, so we provide more resources through that. So the system is changing. There's more capital. Once again, they're in a larger grouping, and that institution that they're linked to is much more formal. And so they are learning to interact with more formal mechanisms. And that's where transformation happens. It's when the system changes. It's when that's coupled with coupled with behavior change. And a piece of behavior change is trust.
Absolutely.
All of these steps are trust building steps. People are putting their individual household savings into groups to access bigger capital. So they're taking risk, but they're also getting benefit from that. But that's a trust building process. And savings groups also, I'm just giving you the trajectory for, there's another trajectory for these. So what we've noticed also too is around 12 to 24 months, savings groups, in the event of a shock, also become protagonists with regards to assembling their resources and contributing to community response. So they are now investing in community responses in the early warning committees. So now you have these groups starting to act uniformly to, and the important thing to remember is these groups are 70% female. So these are female groupings investing in community level response.
I was going to ask you about that actually. Yeah.
In male dominated community level institutions. And so once again, that's another pathway of empowerment. And so, if you were to ask me, where do we there's many touch points that we have with the NDP 9 with regards to, I think it's pillar 3 around social development, right? These sort of things where females now have avenues, they have resource and avenues to participate in civic life. Because you can have all the barriers in the world to cultural barriers to participation, but ultimately, and I think uniquely and particularly in Somalia, money talks. So if you bring money to the table, your voice, regardless of gender, increases dramatically.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Okay. Thank you for.
So absorptive, adaptive, and transformative. That's just one journey of. I could do that with farmers groups. I can do, every single intervention has these pathways. And I think that's the important thing about these multi-sector, multi-year interventions is that is better than emergency is that we know where we want to go the first day we're there. We know in 4 years we want people to be here. Whereas in emergency, you're just there to do stuff with people every single year. the shock might be different. You're going to do stuff with them, but you have no plan for them. There's no set of multi-year interventions that you hope people will progress along. You know, they fall back because a shock happens, right? A massive drought can wipe people out. But, you know, you might have to restart with them, but at least you're restarting with them on a pathway again.
Yeah. You're not starting from absolute zero.
Right.
Yeah.
We know that they have behaviors. I mean, behaviors, even if circumstances change and ultimately unsuccessful, you still don't lose those behaviors immediately if you're put right back in systems that support those behaviors. And again.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think what I'm really taking away from what you're saying is that the difference between being reactive and you know, when something bad happens, getting in there as like just to save lives versus building an entire system that can help people withstand these shocks that are going to come at, you know, at some point in life. You can always rely on them to come. Yeah. And you talked about the sort of various shocks that you guys deal with, and then there's of course the unpredictable ones, the ones that no one see coming, like COVID-19, which we're all sort of dealing with in the world, and it's something that has, you know, a pandemic that has touched every aspect of our lives, and I'm sure that it's the same in Somalia. So what has been sort of the impact of COVID-19 and on the work that you do and the communities that you work with?
Well, I mean, look, I'll start from, we've talked a lot about household and community adaptive capacity. Institutions like the SomReP also need to be adaptive. And so we have found ourselves pivoting to do, you know, reprogramming some of our interventions to do hygiene and sanitation promotion. Most visibly, one intervention that we have done is to, we support a platform called the Somalia Response Innovation Lab. And that's a platform which is housed under the SomReP, but is not SomReP. So it's available to a whole host of different NGOs, government, academia, etc. Under normal conditions, that platform serves as a brokerage of bringing innovators, challenge holders, innovation finance together to pilot proven best practice. But when COVID-19 struck, because of its extensive networks, particularly with Somali media and IT content providers, it was able to quickly pivot and partner with the Ministry of Health to produce COVID-19 health messaging. In fact, it was the first entity before UNICEF, before any NGO, to start producing Somali language content for COVID. Now it has 14, 15 products that it's produced over the last, I don't know, how long have we been doing this? 6 months now?
Forever.
So yeah, I mean, and it's partnered with the Ministry of Health deeply. I mean, it even, you know, the Ministry of Health, it had already developed 3 videos before the Ministry of Health had even devised a system to develop videos. So, you know, it was basically pushing the Ministry of Health in a sense to come up with a protocol. Because it had resources, the Ministry of Health had a need, but the Ministry of Health didn't have a protocol to generate this content. So I think that's one way we've been impactful. I think, like I said, we are piloting new approaches to deliver those messages through our work of early warning committees. So we've just distributed tablets to our early warning committees. These download, they're only able to download the content that we produce on 19. And so our early warning committees have become yet another distribution method for COVID-19 messaging. And once again, this is MOH approved, WHO vetted messaging. So it's very reliable, scientifically based messaging. You know, it doesn't go through that filter of somebody learning something, maybe forgetting part of it,
Yeah.
and then speaking to their community. They hold up a tablet.
Yeah.
And the tablet has it has kids shows on it that deal with COVID-19. It has very boring, functional health messages on it. It's got a variety of content. And as we continue to create more content, we will continue to upload those onto those tablets so that it becomes, and one of the things is also, who do people trust? Right? They already trust their early warning committees. They already trust the leadership of their early warning committees. So these are very good people to use to transmit this message. And they don't have to learn anything. They just hold up the tablet. And if they listen to it enough, they'll also learn the content and be able to just tell people about it.
Yeah. And are they in Somali, this content?
Sorry?
Is this content in Somali?
Yeah. Everything is in Somali.
Wow.
It's all made with the Ministry of Health. It's all made with Somali media companies.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, basically what our guy does is he brokers Johns Hopkins University Medical Center, MOH, and he makes sure that the production process of that content flows through that. So Johns Hopkins gives their advice, MOH gives their advice, the content producer produces something, it gets vetted by the content provider, the two other partners, and they make sure that it's good science, aligned, and government approved.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
No problem. Happy to help.
Excellent.